This is one of those times when crime really doesn't pay. So The Collector tells the story of a thief breaking into a rich house that a demented serial killer has already transformed into his shop of torture. Welcome to The Collector Reviews. Ever announced it a couple of times, but yes, these two films will round out the 31 films that we're going to be ranking on Halloween. So I wanted to go ahead and get some reviews out. These are two movies that I've wanted to review for a while, so what better way? So I saw The Collector for the first time actually in the theaters. I snuck into it. I had both of my cousins came down for that summer. We went and saw A Perfect Getaway and then snuck into The Collector, or possibly went to see The Collector and snuck into A Perfect Getaway. But nonetheless, we ripped off one of them. And The Collector is one of those movies that ever since the first time I saw it, I've been a huge fan of it. So starting right off with the positives, I've got to go ahead and just talk about the main character, Rincon, because there's not too many slasher films, and I do consider this a slasher film, not a torture porn film, even though it definitely rides the line of that. You don't see too many protagonists in slasher films that gives this much focus and has such a great character arc and has so many qualities that make you identify with that character and root for that character. A lot of times in slasher films you get a group of characters, they get picked off one by one and you're just left with one of them. Sometimes you get one that you like and you kind of root for them the whole time, but most oftentimes it's just however fate plays out. When you get this film, Rincon is really your only protagonist. He's the only one that has any chance of surviving this. But he also has a really cool character arc in the sense that he's not really a good guy. He's not necessarily a bad guy, but he does bad shit. He's a thief. He has some kind of inner workings in this crime underbelly. His wife is tied up in it somehow, where she's accrued some kind of a debt that she has to pay off by midnight otherwise. So he kind of utilizes his skills, his relationships, and his ties with his own little, crime lords to set up this deal where he's going to rob this jewel out of this house that he's been casing for the past couple of weeks and deliver it to them and get money for her to get out of her debt by midnight. So that is the initial setup. That is what launches him into this situation, which is a good enough setup for a movie all on its own. But he gets to the house and you have the Collector who's already there fucking shit up. And he's just a really nice dichotomy to the Collector, where you have this guy that's focused on torture and pain and manipulation and just getting joy out of seeing people just be rats in mazes and getting taken limb from limb. And then you have Rincon, who's very much trying to just ensure the survival of his family, ensure the survival of his wife, the safety of his daughter. And then he goes in, and immediately after getting stuck in this situation with the Collector, you see a lot of his qualities and a lot of the heart that this character has start to come through, where he's putting his own goals, his own mission on pause, not only for his own survival, but to try to help this family that he was initially just gonna rip off and leave. You got the wife, the husband that he's trying to help. Eventually you get to a segment where he has escaped the house completely. He is home free. He's not only safe from the Collector, but he is safe to go and secure the safety of his wife and his daughter and pay off this debt. And then he sees the daughter for this family knocking on the window that she's still up there, and he turns around and goes back to save her and puts everything on the line to try to ensure this family's life. So it's just a really great character to gain your focus and to go along this journey with, and kind of provide a lot of that good as the flip side of the coin to all the evil that is shown in this film.
Where are you going? Is that all you got, you little bitch? Is that all you got, you fucking faggot? Is that all you got, you little fucking faggot bitch?
And then you have the opposite side of that coin with the Collector, who I think, in my opinion, is the biggest potential for a new horror icon that we have had in the past decade or so. A lot of people would say Jigsaw. I don't even think Jigsaw really counts, because most of the time he's not even the one doing shit. But I think the Collector, since like the slasher icons of the 80s and the few that came out in the 90s like Ghostface, has the most potential to be one of those recognizable slasher villains. He's not quite there yet. He's still got a third movie coming out. Hopefully that seals the deal. But for me, the look of this character, the way that the mask is, just the simple look of him where he's got this black suit, black gloves, and this really crazy looking mask to where it's just simple. It's just almost looks like I don't know if it's cloth or leather, but it just covers his face in a certain configuration just enough to make it look disturbing. And especially in this movie where the light kind of bounces off of his eyes and almost makes his eyes look empty and soulless. Just a very cool, simple design for a slasher. And as far as just the actual performance of the character and his utilization in the story, demented as hell. This guy's setting up traps, letting the family loose, seeing how they fuck themselves up, but he's also, once he gets them, like the husband and the wife, tied down where he wants them, he just slowly tortures them. He's sewing the wife's mouth shut, he's watching the daughter get, you know, fondled by her boyfriend, and then basically lets them both kill themselves in his traps. I mean, this guy has just got torture and pain and dismemberment covered on pretty much all fronts. And that's what you want in a villain in this type of film, where he's intimidating, he's scary, he's got enough edge to where he's almost a little bit cool in a demented way, but at the same time, he's effective as a villain. He's intimidating, he is a force to be reckoned with. Maybe not a physical threat, but his intellect and the level of demented that this guy will go to with his victims makes him a scary force to be reckoned with.
Freeze! Do not move! Freeze! Raise your arms! Raise them! Drop your weapon! Drop the weapon! Unit 316 is dismissed!
I also like the setup of all the traps. There's something I'll comment on it a little bit later in regard to the extravagancy of these traps, but I'm not really a big Saw guy. I haven't reviewed the movies and I haven't watched them in a while, so maybe whenever I do a review series on them, I'll kind of come around to them, but never was a big fan of that. This movie was actually kind of conceived as an origin story for Jigsaw, and then it was kind of turned into something else, thank God in my opinion. But a lot of the traps and a lot of the way that it's set up is really entertaining. Like, it's cool to see how these traps are set up and how they kind of, when somebody activates something, you get a lot of camera angles where it follows a wire or it shows a gear, and you know, you get like this little, almost like how Fast and the Furious shoots through the engine and shows the NOS. It's kind of the same type of camera work where it shoots through all these different angles of this trap. And then you finally see what exactly happens whenever they press that button after you've gone through all the pieces of the maze and they get launched across the room onto a spike, or they have their hand chopped off by a fallen machete and they fall into some bear traps, or there's a whole room with like acid glue. That's some crazy ass shit. Pulls a cat off, throws it in the window, and the fucking window cuts it in half anyway. It's pretty insane. It gets ramped up throughout the movie, but the traps are one of the cooler aspects to this first film. And the gore, the carnage candy, whoo, it's here. It's here in The Collector. This is one of those movies that goes for a very dark, grimy, grounded, demented version of gore. It's not really a movie that takes the approach of a lot of slashers where the gore is just made to be excess for like a crazy version of fun, kind of like the Friday the 13th approach. This one is meant to disturb you. It's meant to make you wince. It's meant to make you feel scared for these characters and to feel fear for the Collector. And it works because you get some scenes where like the practical effects involved with, there's a character that gets hung upside down at one point and he's cut through the middle and all of his intestines and shit are on the floor. You've got people who are getting their mouth sewn that really looks real. It does not look like taped stitches. It looks like somebody just sewed that bitch's mouth shut. You get people thrown across the room and there's a bunch of spikes and one spike goes through her eye and her eye is just a little bit messed up from the one spike. It's little tiny demented attention to detail like that that makes the gore and the carnage candy and the Collector definitely effective for a horror film, but effective at grossing you out in a way where it really enhances how good of a person and how great of a character that Arkin is, that you see stuff like this going on, you're like, psh, it makes that decision that should be very easy so much harder because of all the crazy shit that he has just seen. And it's just a great classic story of good and evil. When you go to a film like this, you know, whether you come to it for the slasher side of things or whether you were drawn in saying that it's a torture porn type film and you were kind of into that era, this is not a movie that just relies on gore. This is not a movie that just says, okay, we're gonna gross you out for 90 minutes and then you can go about your way. This is a movie that does have a story to tell. It does have that classic battle of good versus evil, and it does a very good job of sizing up both sides of that coin, and you just invest yourself in seeing which side of that coin is going to end up on top. Is the collector ultimately going to be the one who is a step ahead, who's a little bit more on top of things, who's a little bit smarter, a little bit more used to this situation, he's eventually going to get what he has came for? Or do you have Arkin, who's a little bit sly, a lot more creative and a lot more smart than most horror protagonists, has a bigger heart than most horror protagonists? Is his moral code going to eventually lead to his downfall, or is good going to win out? And it's just a very interesting way to kind of glue your eyes to the screen with a movie that is a splatterfest and has a lot of tortures and traps and everything like that in there. You get that extra little nugget of story that makes this movie rise above the pack of movies in that era. And I will say too, all of the acting in this film is really good. Not just from Arkin and not just from the collector, but from all the side characters, which for the most part, for most of the runtime of the movie, just need to act scared or act like they're in pain or respond to torture and respond to this situation. People in horror films are actually pretty underrated for what their performances really require of them. Yes, they're not necessarily going for this Oscar moment, but whenever you have somebody where you're like, okay, you've been tortured for hours, you're missing limbs, your wife is in the next room being tortured, your daughter's somewhere in the house, I need you to convey all of that emotion, action. And they do it. Whenever you see a guy and he's so brought to tears and he's hyperventilating and he's scared and he's in pain and he's worried all at once, you get all of those emotions from these little side characters that are literally there for cannon fodder, but they're just so much more effective than most people that deliver the cannon fodder type of performance. And finally, I think this movie has a badass ending. I love when a film has the balls to do the unexpected, to go out on a little bit of a downer, or to go out on a shocking moment or something to kind of keep you at the edge of your seat and make you pray that there's a sequel. And you know, at the time when I saw this film, the collection wasn't a thing yet. This was only a singular movie. And even if this had stayed a singular movie, I think that it has a badass enough ending and like enough of a little bit of a twist on what you were expecting to happen that it just ends with a punch. It ends with a little bit of like the practical effects with the spinning ambulance are really badass, but just the whole effect of the collector coming in and the way that the camera cuts whenever he does certain things, like he slices Arkin off of this little chair and throws him into this bin and he's slamming down on it and you get the various camera angles from inside and the outside of it, slams it down, the camera just cuts black, and then the camera cuts back in and he goes and he slams the doors and the camera cuts to black for a second, and then it comes back on and he strips the little exterminator logo off of his van and it just cuts to black and whoosh, the collector. Just badass. A very stylistic ending, but story-wise, where everything ends up, pretty kick-ass. As far as negatives, I really only have two. The main one is that they do stretch plausibility quite a bit with these traps. Like I've already said, I like the traps, I like the intensity of them, I like the variety of them, I like the way that they shoot the mechanics of the traps. But whenever you take this movie at face value, especially for how grounded and how realistic of a tone that they go for, and you look at like the timeline of when Arkin leaves the house to maybe not even 4 hours later comes back to rob it, and this guy by himself is able to string up all of these contraptions in this house, it does stretch plausibility. It even stretches plausibility with how over the top some of these traps are and how much he's able to do in all of these rooms by himself without anybody fucking up these traps or him setting them off by himself. So it's enough to where you can recognize it, you buy into it, you're like, okay, Kind of bullshit, but I'm along for the ride. I like the movie, so you can let those little logic gaps go if you enjoy it enough. But a movie this grounded does bring attention to logic gaps like this. If this had more of a silly tone like Friday the 13th or even some of the Texas Chainsaws, where it's not really going for realism and you know this is heightened all the way around, it wouldn't stand out as much. But this movie is so grimy and grounded and realistic and just almost too real for comfort that stuff like that will stand out more. And the last one is just the way that they decided to shoot this film in such a lower quality, a much more grainy quality to the picture. It does age this film, and the more that time goes on, the more that technology advances, going from like DVD to Blu-ray to 4K to whatever the fuck comes next, this movie looks worse as time goes on. It's very similar to what I said when I reviewed 28 Days Later, to where that grimy, kind of grainy, lower quality tone that they went for in that and this does add to that more grounded, grimy, realistic feel to it, and it adds to the tone and the vibe of the movie, which is good. But presentation-wise, it just doesn't really play well as time goes on. And you know, when you watch this film, like I just watched the Blu-ray, and there's certain scenes to where if it's dark enough, it's hidden and it doesn't really bother you so much. Or if there's a certain color palette, like the more orange color palette that they go for in some of the torture and kill scenes in this one, they kind of go for that edge. Some of the other color palettes, or even some of the lighter scenes, you really see that grainy quality in the picture, and it's almost to the point of being distracting to a bit. Once you notice it, you can kind of get past it and just watch the movie for what it is, but there's moments where you see it and you're just like, God damn, why does this movie look so rough? But overall, guys, I'm a huge fan of The Collector. This is one of my favorite horror icons that have come out in the past 10, maybe even 20 years. I think that the movie is very effective, not only story-wise, but for all of the intensity that it goes for in the kills and the gore. I love both of the characters on the evil and good side of the coin, with the Collector as a badass villain and Arkin as a badass, smart, and very capable protagonist that you root for. And I just like all those extra things that this movie brings to not only slashers, but the kind of the torture type movies that came out in this era that a lot of those films didn't bother themselves with. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna fucking kill you. I'm gonna fucking kill you. So if you guys want to see a more modern, gritty slasher film, or if you like the torture genre and the torture era and you want to see a film that maybe had a little bit more to offer than some of its peers, definitely check out The Collector and go out and buy it. So what do you guys think of The Collector? Are you a fan of this film? Did you not like it when it came out? Do you prefer the sequel that I'm going to be reviewing very soon? Are you looking forward to The Collected? Let me know all of your thoughts on The Collector down in the comment section below. And are you excited for 31 on 31? Subscriber. If you guys want to check out some social media links, check the video description below for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel, help this channel grow, and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only. Just a little bit below that, you can scroll down and see my Teespring store. My Teespring shelf has all of my merchandise designs, including 3 31 on 31 designs that you should check out now and go ahead and get it and get ready for this Halloween whenever we drop that video. And if you guys just want to check out some more of my videos, you can check out a few more by clicking right over here.